Gunshots ring out in the dead of night. 8 lives lost, and the community of Pike County, Ohio, is left reeling. In the hours that follow, investigators discover the grisly scene. 4 homes, each one soaked in blood. The victims? Members of the Rhoden family. Execution style, without mercy. As the investigation unfolds, the questions pile up. Who would commit such a ruthless act? And why would someone target a family so close to home? The shocking truth wouldn't come until 2 years later, when surveillance footage and hidden clues led authorities to the unthinkable. The Wagner family, neighbors of the Rhodens, had orchestrated the massacre. What started as a bitter custody dispute between Jake Wagner and Hannah Rhoden escalated into a violent plan of revenge, leaving a community in disbelief. Tonight, we reveal the chilling story of the Pike County Massacre, one that exposes the darkest side of betrayal and family loyalty. Stay with me. Pike County, Ohio, is a place where everyone knows everyone. With its winding roads and sprawling farms, this rural community has always prided itself on its close-knit nature. It's the kind of town where neighbors are family, and life moves at a slower pace, until the night of April 21, 2016, when everything changed. The Rhoden family had deep roots in Pike County. They were hard-working, humble people, known for their loyalty and unity. The family lived scattered across the county, but their bonds were undeniable. At the heart of the family was the matriarch, Peggy Rhoden, who raised her children with love and pride. But behind this picture of serenity, something was amiss. What could drive someone to murder 8 members of a family so closely tied to their own community? Was it a random act of violence, or something more personal? And what role did the Wagner family, who lived just miles away, play in this devastating crime? The answers wouldn't come easily. As the investigation began, law enforcement was confronted with more questions than answers. What could have led to such a brutal execution of an entire family? And, more shockingly, why did it take so long for anyone to uncover the truth? Stay with me, as we uncover the web of secrets that led to the massacre and the chilling betrayal that shocked Pike County to its core. The Rhoden family had been part of Pike County's fabric for generations, known for their hard work and close-knit ties. At the heart of the family was 40-year-old Christopher Rhoden Sr., a father who had spent his life working in the woods and farming the land. He had 6 children, each with their own hopes and dreams. They lived quietly, deeply entrenched in their small-town life, not unlike any other rural family. But one fateful night, everything changed. The family had gathered together in their homes, as they often did, but they never expected it would be their last. By the morning of April 22, 2016, their lives, along with their dreams, would be reduced to tragedy. Christopher Rhoden Sr. was found murdered in his mobile home, along with his cousin, Gary Rhoden. At a nearby trailer, his children, 32-year-old Clarence, 26-year-old Dana, and 16-year-old Hannah Rhoden, were found dead. Even more disturbing, Hannah's 6-month-old baby girl was unharmed, found alive in her crib, left untouched by the horror around her. But who could have done this? Why would anyone target a family that had been so deeply embedded in the community? The unanswered questions were staggering, and the brutality of the crime left investigators scrambling for answers. Was it a random act of violence, or was there something more personal at play? Was the motive revenge, or something far darker? And who, if anyone, could have predicted the terrifying secret that would unravel this case, and reveal the family that would become its ultimate betrayers? Stay with us, because what comes next will shake you to the core. At first glance, the Wagner family seemed like any other, quiet, hard-working, and well-known in Pike County. But behind closed doors, they were harboring secrets that no one could have imagined. Jake Wagner, the son of Angela Wagner and George "Billy" Wagner IV, had been in a relationship with Hannah Rhoden, a member of the Rhoden family. Together, they shared a child, but their relationship had fallen apart, leading to a bitter custody battle. But custody disputes don't typically lead to murder. What was it about this one that drove Jake Wagner, and eventually his entire family, to such extreme lengths? Angela Wagner, Jake's mother, had her own role in this twisted scheme. As a mother fiercely protective of her son, she helped him execute a plan so disturbing it would leave the entire community in shock. How far would a parent go to ensure their child's wishes were carried out? Billy Wagner, Jake's father, was no stranger to conflict. A man of few words but immense control, he seemed to quietly support his son's decisions. But did he know just how far Jake was willing to take things? And what role did he play in the final act of violence? As authorities began to look closer, a chilling connection began to form. The Wagners were not merely bystanders in this tragedy, they were orchestrating it from behind the scenes. What pushed them to take such drastic action? Was it just about a custody fight, or was there something darker that the Wagners were protecting? And how did this seemingly ordinary family become the architects of one of Ohio's most horrifying massacres? As investigators pieced the puzzle together, the truth would soon be revealed. This family didn't just plan a murder, they planned to erase an entire bloodline. The question now is, how did they execute such a meticulously calculated crime? The night was supposed to be like any other in Pike County. But on April 21, 2016, as the clock ticked past midnight, the Rhoden family's world was violently upended. At 1 a.m., the first call came in, a frantic report of a shooting at one of the Rhoden homes. Within hours, law enforcement flooded the area, uncovering a scene that would haunt them for years. 8 bodies, 6 adults and 2 teenagers, lay lifeless, each one executed with precision, shot point-blank in their own homes. The victims were spread across 4 locations, a stark contrast to the family's usual peaceful existence. 2 children miraculously survived, found hiding in their rooms, untouched by the horror that had unfolded. But what would be their future after witnessing such brutality? The method of execution was chillingly consistent, each victim shot in the head, in what appeared to be a coordinated effort. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. It was as if the killer, or killers, knew exactly where to strike. Could this be the work of someone close to the family? Someone who knew the Rhodens' routines, their movements, their weaknesses? As the bodies were discovered and evidence began to mount, investigators couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act of violence. No, this was personal. And when they learned that marijuana grow operations were present at 2 of the crime scenes, the initial thought was that this could have been a gang-related hit. But something didn't sit right. Why had they spared the children? Why was the entire family wiped out, and yet no one had disturbed the children's rooms? Was this a message? A revenge killing, or something more calculated? The investigation was at a standstill, until one crucial piece of information broke through the darkness. Surveillance footage from a nearby area revealed a key detail: a car, seen leaving the vicinity just hours before the bodies were discovered. Who was behind the wheel? And what connection did they have to the Rhodens? The investigators had no idea just how far this case would go, and how twisted the truth would become. What was the real motive behind the massacre? Who had the patience and the cold-bloodedness to execute a plan so methodical? And most importantly, who was hiding in plain sight, pulling the strings behind this horrifying act? As the sun rose over Pike County on April 22, 2016, the scale of the tragedy began to sink in. For the first time in years, a place known for its tranquility and tight-knit community was now facing the unthinkable. The Rhoden family, 8 victims, ranging in age from 16 to 44, had been found dead in 4 different homes, all in a horrifyingly similar fashion. Shot execution style, with no signs of struggle. No forced entry. It appeared to be a calculated, cold-blooded execution. The local sheriff, Charles Reeder, stood before the cameras, his face somber. "This is a very tragic day for Pike County," he said, struggling to contain his emotions. "We're going to get to the bottom of this." But what they didn't know was just how deep the mystery would go. With no clear motive and no apparent connection between the victims, investigators had no suspects. The community was shaken, but still, the question echoed: who could do something like this? At first, theories ran wild. Was this the work of a professional hitman? Was it tied to drugs, or perhaps the illegal marijuana grow operation found on Rhoden family property? Local law enforcement followed every lead, but everything seemed to circle back to one painful reality: there was no one to point the finger at. Then, as the weeks wore on, a breakthrough came, but it wasn't from a dramatic revelation or new evidence. It came from something as simple as a grainy security camera footage. This footage, taken from a nearby property, showed a black pickup truck driving past the homes of the Rhodens just hours before the killings. The truck was seen leaving the area at the same time of the murders. Was this the break investigators had been waiting for? Or just another dead end? The search for the owner of the truck took police through a web of interviews and dead ends. But as weeks passed, an unsettling theory began to take shape. Surveillance footage, combined with witness testimonies, pointed to a chilling possibility. Someone close to the family might have been involved. But who could it be? As investigators dug deeper into the Rhodens' personal lives, they started to focus on one family in particular, the Wagners. The Wagners had been neighbors of the Rhodens for years, living only a few miles away. They had been known to frequent the same places and even had close relationships with the victims. But most crucially, Jake Wagner, the son of the Wagner family, had a long-standing custody dispute with Hannah Rhoden, the mother of one of his children. Could this custody battle have spiraled into something far more deadly? There were whispers of tension between Jake and Hannah, and even rumors of threats. But none of that seemed like enough to drive someone to murder an entire family. Yet, there were signs of something brewing beneath the surface. As the investigation continued, the Wagners began to look more and more suspicious. Investigators learned that Jake Wagner, along with his mother Angela, father George IV, and brother Billy, had been in close contact with the Rhodens shortly before the massacre. Could a custody battle be the hidden motive behind a mass killing? But what investigators didn't know yet was how deep the Wagner family's involvement went, or how calculated their actions truly were. The Wagners were not just connected to the Rhodens, they were key players in a carefully orchestrated plan. And then, just as the investigation seemed to stall once again, another clue surfaced, one that would send shockwaves through the entire case. What would this new discovery reveal? And how far would the truth go? Stay tuned. As the case went cold, it seemed as though the truth would never be uncovered. Investigators had no suspects, and the Rhoden family's brutal killings remained a mystery. But then, in the fall of 2017, a break in the case came from an unexpected source: surveillance footage. A grainy image from a nearby gas station showed a white pickup truck, a truck that had been seen near the Rhoden homes on the night of the murders. The vehicle was registered to a family known to law enforcement, the Wagner family. But this discovery raised even more questions. How were the Wagners connected to the Rhodens? And what role did they play in the massacre? As investigators dug deeper, they found more unsettling evidence, this time in the form of cell phone records. Jake Wagner's phone had pinged near the crime scene in the early hours of April 21st. But what could have possibly driven a man to betray his neighbors in such a brutal way? Then came the final twist: forensic evidence linking the Wagners to the crime scenes. A hidden homemade silencer found near one of the bodies matched a silencer found in Jake Wagner's home. How had they gotten so close without being detected? And why would a family, so seemingly normal, want to carry out such an execution? The pieces were starting to fit together, but there was still one question left unanswered: why did the Wagners do it? The investigation was about to take a turn that would reveal the shocking truth behind this calculated massacre. Next, we'll uncover what drove Jake Wagner to such a dark act of revenge. Was it simply about a custody battle, or was there something even more chilling lurking beneath the surface? 2 years. 2 long years of unanswered questions. The Pike County massacre had become one of Ohio's most haunting mysteries. With no leads and the Rhoden family's killer still on the loose, investigators began to lose hope. But then, a break in the case, one that no one expected. In the fall of 2018, authorities arrested Jake Wagner, the man at the center of the case. But that was just the beginning. The arrest came after months of painstaking surveillance, wiretaps, and digging into the Wagner family's every move. What they discovered next would send shockwaves through the community. As Jake Wagner was taken into custody, it was revealed that his mother, Angela Wagner, his father, George "Billy" Wagner IV, and his brother, George Wagner III, were all implicated in the killings. But why would an entire family conspire to murder their neighbors? What could possibly justify such a cold, calculated massacre? The Wagners' motives went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Was it truly just about a custody battle, or was there something darker at play? Something that had been brewing under the surface for years? With the Wagners in custody, authorities were now racing against time to build a case that could bring justice for the Rhoden family. But as the details of the Wagner family's involvement started to emerge, a chilling question loomed large. Who else might be involved? And could they be closer to the Rhodens than anyone ever realized? Stay with me as we uncover the devastating truth behind the Wagner family's involvement in the Pike County massacre. The arrest of the Wagner family sent shockwaves through Pike County. What had once seemed like an unsolvable mystery now had answers, but the real battle was just beginning. With the community stunned and the media in a frenzy, the legal proceedings promised to be just as shocking. Jake Wagner, the mastermind behind the massacre, was the first to be charged. His arrest, on November 13, 2018, marked the beginning of a slow, complicated process that would unearth even darker secrets. As authorities prepared for trial, the questions only grew. What kind of person could plan such an execution-style massacre? Was Jake Wagner a cold-blooded killer, or was he simply a pawn in a twisted family drama? But the legal process didn't come without complications. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Jake Wagner agreed to testify against his family, a deal that would eventually unravel the depths of the Wagner family's involvement. What would Jake say in his testimony? Would his words bring justice to the Rhoden family, or would they create more questions than answers? Angela Wagner, Jake's mother, and George Wagner IV, his father, also faced charges. Angela, who had played a key role in the planning, was charged with complicity. George IV, described as the enforcer, allegedly helped carry out the murders. But the Wagners weren't the only ones with their backs against the wall. Each member of the family was left to confront their own actions in court, all while the public was watching their every move. As the trial date loomed, defense attorneys began their preparations, trying to secure lighter sentences by shifting blame and questioning the evidence. Was the evidence against the Wagners truly enough to convict them of such heinous crimes? Could they argue that this was all one family's tragic breakdown, or would the court see it for what it truly was, cold, premeditated murder? The courtroom drama would unfold in the years to come, but what shocked everyone was the revelation of Jake Wagner's true motivations. Was it truly just about custody, or was something much darker at play? Stay tuned, because what happened next would change everything for the Wagner family. Could the jury ever see them as anything but monsters? Would the Rhodens ever find peace? The answers were just beginning to unfold. As the courtroom fell silent, the weight of justice hung heavy in the air. Jake Wagner, once a neighbor, now a convicted murderer, stood before the judge. His face was emotionless, as if the gravity of his actions had not yet fully set in. For the murder of 8 people, his neighbors, his former family, Jake would face life in prison. But what about the others? Angela Wagner, his mother, had stood by him throughout the process, offering him unwavering support. Was she just as guilty as her son? The judge's words would soon reveal the answers. Angela Wagner, the judge began, you have committed an unspeakable crime. Your actions, driven by a twisted sense of protection for your family, have destroyed the lives of the Rhoden family, leaving scars that will last forever. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. But it wasn't just Jake and Angela. The Wagner patriarch, George IV, had been involved too. And his sentencing was not going to be easy. With the evidence piling against him, George's role in planning the massacre raised questions about how far the Wagner family's dark plan had truly gone. Was he the mastermind? Or had he merely been a puppet to his son's rage? George Wagner IV, the judge said, you are sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. And yet, there was one question still hanging in the air. Billy Wagner, the youngest of the Wagner men, had somehow escaped the same fate. He had been arrested, but his fate remained uncertain. Was he truly innocent in all of this? Or was he part of the plan, just waiting for his time in the courtroom? The Rhoden family, still reeling from the pain of losing 8 loved ones, watched as justice was served. But could it ever truly be enough? Could the Wagner family ever understand the extent of their actions? Or was the cycle of hatred and vengeance never truly broken? The last sentencing had been handed down, but the story was far from over. What happens to a family once the walls of their world come crashing down? What happens to a community once trust is shattered forever? Stay with me as we uncover the lasting effects of the Pike County Massacre and the aftermath that still haunts everyone involved. The aftermath of the Pike County Massacre reverberated far beyond the crime scene. In a small, rural town where everyone knew each other, trust was shattered. The Rhoden family was buried, their deaths haunting the town's collective memory. But the true horror lay in what followed, the revelation that their killers lived just down the road. How could someone, a neighbor, be capable of such violence? How could a family tear apart another family so mercilessly? For those closest to the Rhodens, the loss was incomprehensible. The massacre destroyed not just lives but a community's sense of security. Children who had played together, families who had shared meals, now found themselves forever changed by a betrayal so deep, so unfathomable, it seemed impossible. For months, local businesses struggled to keep their doors open. Residents couldn't walk down Main Street without feeling the weight of the tragedy. There was no escaping the questions. Who else knew? Could anyone have stopped this? Investigators worked tirelessly, but with every new detail, it felt like the wounds only deepened. Even as Jake Wagner's confession and arrest shed light on the crime, the psychological scars remained. The community could now grasp the evil that had unfolded in their midst. But the grief, the anger, and the uncertainty lingered. Were they safe in their homes? Could a similar tragedy happen again? But perhaps the most haunting question for Pike County's residents: would justice ever truly be served? As the Wagner family's trial unfolded, many hoped that at least some form of closure would bring peace. But with each day in court, it became clear that the wounds would never heal completely. For the survivors, those who lost everything, justice could never replace what was taken from them. The impact was felt far and wide, as national media descended on Pike County, turning this quiet rural town into the center of a true crime phenomenon. Yet, for those who had lived the tragedy, the media frenzy was another reminder of their profound loss. The small town that had once been a symbol of tight-knit families was now forever marked by bloodshed and betrayal. How do you begin to rebuild after something like this? How do you heal when the very people who should have been your protectors become your tormentors? For Pike County, the answer is still unfolding. As we reflect on the tragedy that unfolded in Pike County, we're left with unsettling questions that go beyond the case itself. What does this say about the lengths to which people are willing to go when they feel their world is being threatened? How can a simple family dispute turn into a horrific, calculated act of violence? The Pike County Massacre is a stark reminder that even the most peaceful and unsuspecting communities can harbor deep, festering tensions. What started as a custody battle, an everyday legal issue for many families, escalated into a catastrophic loss of life. How much could have been avoided if these tensions had been addressed earlier? Was there ever a point where this tragic event could have been prevented? Jake Wagner's betrayal of his own family, the calculated way he involved his parents and brother in the plan, forces us to consider: what drives someone to turn on the people they should trust the most? Could anyone have seen the warning signs of a man capable of such brutality? The truth is, no one truly saw it coming. But in hindsight, it becomes evident that a family's deep divisions and the desire for control were the real catalysts. This case challenges us to rethink what we know about family dynamics, vengeance, and the capacity for violence that can hide behind a seemingly normal exterior. And finally, it raises one of the most uncomfortable truths of all: how well do we really know the people closest to us? Could any of the Rhodens, or even the Wagners, have predicted such an outcome? This massacre, born from bitterness and jealousy, serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes, the danger is closer than we think. As the trial concluded and the Wagner family was sentenced, the full scope of their betrayal sank in. For the Rhoden family, justice felt bittersweet. While Jake Wagner pled guilty, and his family members faced long sentences, the survivors were left to pick up the pieces. The emotional toll of losing 8 loved ones in the most brutal of ways was not something the community could easily recover from. But what about the children who survived that night? How would they grow up, knowing that their own neighbors were responsible for the horror that shattered their family? And what about the trust that was forever broken in a place once defined by neighborly bonds? The Pike County Massacre wasn't just a crime against the Rhodens, it was a blow to an entire community, one that will never feel the same again. So, when we ask, what happens when a family betrays another to the point of murder? The answer isn't just found in the courtrooms or the headlines. It's found in the years of grief, trauma, and loss that follow. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was there ever a point where someone could have stopped the Wagner family's path to murder? And can a community ever truly heal from such an act of betrayal? These questions will remain as part of the legacy of the Pike County Massacre, reminding us that sometimes the darkest secrets come from those we trust the most. If you found this story haunting, share your thoughts and reflections below. Could you have seen the signs? Do you think justice has truly been served? Let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on future cases like this.